So today we're talking about a storyline that I've covered before. This was the brutal murder involving bongo drums, lock cutters or box cutters or something. Just a horrific, horrific crime. The real story surrounding it is how Seattle media has left out kind of a couple of details. That's the interesting thing to me is that, okay, are we doing kind of a cover up here, or are we protecting people that we believe should be protected? When in fact, if this was a story about something else, somewhat similar, but maybe on a more conservative bent, it would be the first thing out of every newscaster's mouth, and every first sentence in every, post would be a Christian reading the Bible finds inspiration to murder another human being. That would literally be like the lead off, because that's how news works. But it feels like, because this story isn't really what we want to get out there, because it doesn't really fill the narrative that mainstream media wants, it's being pushed aside. And those facts are that this murderer was awake for 4 days doing a little meth. Okay, that right there can be cause for all kinds of crazy stuff. You ever been up for 4 days? Me neither. Can you imagine? Hopped up on drugs for 4 days. You're coming down. Your head's going to be a little tweaked. You think a hangover the next day after a big wedding or some kind of party or something like that, you think that's bad? 4 days on meth. Yeah, your head might be tweaked a little bit. And at the same time, he's reading from the Quran. So he's getting inspiration from Allah. So you've got that, but nobody wants to report on that. That's what Jason Rance from KTTH is telling us. Let's take a look and see what he's talking about. Because we're talking about bias in media, and it is heavily out there. Maybe that's why you're tuning into News for Reasonable People, because I'm a guy with a business background, been doing business, haven't really been doing, covering the news. And now I kind of read the news and give you my opinion. So if you're new here, welcome. My name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, like I just said, and I read News for Reasonable People. Is it reasonable to cut out some very important facts from a crime story just because it's not a popular thing to do in the media? I don't think so, but I get it. Right? And we're going to talk about it. Seattle media won't report accused murderer says Allah inspired grisly crime. Okay. So right there. Okay. Yeah. We're probably keep that part on the down low, but put the bongo drums in there. They were part of the crime scene. Bongo drums. Police say Tyrone Bernard Wells admitted to brutally murdering his girlfriend in Shoreline. Shoreline is north of downtown Seattle by probably 12 miles, I think. It forms the northern end of King County. While Seattle media outlets were quick to detail the gruesome details of the murder, which included the use of a hatchet, bolt cutters, and a set of drums, local journalists refused to report the motive. It's like, okay, well, the guy was up for, 4 days on, meth, but that probably doesn't have anything to do with it. Maybe a little smidge. So I did see that, but like the first couple of articles I read on this storyline, I read King, I read 𝐏𝐞𝐬, I read 𝐐𝐬. They're all local channels. I read Fox. Didn't say a lot about the drugs, but that part to me is, all right, yeah, that makes sense. This guy is whacked out of his mind. Anybody that takes drugs, no matter what race you are, you're going to be whacked out of your mind, not making rational decisions. We all know that. But then you bring in Allah and the Quran, and you're kind of like, okay, well, it's a slippery slope there. Probably shouldn't talk about that. Court documents reveal that Wells told police that he was awake for days, recently took meth, and read the Quran. These details were missing from the video reports from Como 4, Cairo 7, King 5, and Fox 13. Meanwhile, the Seattle Times falsely claimed that charges don't provide a motive. I think from what I could piece together there, they don't provide a motive, but it's because in the actual charges themselves, it wasn't indicated. So I think that's what the Seattle Times was reporting. I don't know. I'm just an opinion guy. I give you my opinion. Now we have 911 audio that makes Wells' motive clear. He says he did it in the service of Allah. Okay, but he's on drugs, so we get that. Is that an excuse? Hell no. Hell no. Being on drugs to that point, your life goes down that miserable, spiral. You hit rock bottom and you murder somebody. All right. You could have a lot of things going on, but the media has a responsibility to just present the facts as they are instead of filtering it to us. And on this one, it got filtered. Now, if you report those details, does that mean that you are indicating that everybody that's possibly a Muslim might commit a murder like this? No. Are you indicating that anybody who's possibly a Muslim might be high on meth for 4 days? No. It's just kind of what happened. But because in today's day and age, we don't really want to talk about, that's a little bit off limits. And we're going to get into that in a sec. 911 call provides more details. Police released the 911 call where they say Wells admitted to murdering Randy Rios. In the call, a calm but frustrated Wells said, "I'm reporting a murder," as the 911 operator tried to ascertain details on what happened and why Wells opened up. "It was on my account." And the operator goes on to say, "What do you mean it was on your account?" And the guy goes, "That means in the name of Allah, I murdered her." And that part was totally taken out of any of the storylines. I did not see that anywhere. Maybe I missed it somewhere, but I did not see that anywhere. That to me was really interesting. And it's like, okay, but the guy's on drugs, so maybe he's just babbling. Well, no, it's just that it's not good optics. It's not good optics, right? And if this was a Christian, talking about reading from the Bible, that would be the first thing out. Conservative Christian, far right-leaning Christian, reading from the Bible, found inspiration. You can find inspiration in the Bible for all kinds of stuff. I mean, just about everything about humanity is in there, right? So you could discern, I read this scripture here and this led me to go down this road and therefore I did that. All right. But you kind of know that that person is tweaked mentally. You stay up for 4 days and you take inordinate amounts of meth. It's like that guy that he was sexually assaulting a woman in the King County Courthouse of all places in the women's restroom. She's 7 months pregnant. And his claim at that time is that she wanted to engage with him in adult activities because she could sense his meth energy. That's right. His meth energy. So again, not quite all there. Reasonable people, we get that. We understand. But the news should be reporting this. It's like, okay, yeah, but we're adults enough to figure this out. But because this is a storyline that, you got some protected classes in here, we're not going to do it. No, yeah, pretty much just going to bury that on the down low. So this is a media coverage thing. Is there bias in media? Absolutely. We're looking at it. This is it. Court documents made it clear that Wells had been reading from the Quran prior to Rios' arrival, and that verses in the Quran seemed to indicate to him that it would be necessary for him to kill Rios. Well, yeah, but I don't think sane people and reasonable people look at that and go, okay, yeah, but he's clearly out of his mind. So there's that. That's what we look at and go, all right, because other folks can read the same exact book and they don't come to those conclusions on vast majority of cases, right? This detail didn't make it onto on-air coverage from local outlets nor the Seattle Times because it's a hot topic. It's a hot topic, and anything in the media people are shying away from that is slightly controversial. Oh, don't say that. You might get deplatformed. You might get canceled. I am one step away because I read the news. I'm not out investigating it. I am not reporting it. I am basically saying, hey, here's the topic. Here's what I think. I'm kind of one step back from that. And yet I take heat all the time as well. Why'd you talk about that? That's inappropriate. That's not how it goes. That's not right. It's my opinion. So if you don't like my opinion, that's fair. I mean, I have no problem with that. I probably wouldn't like my opinion if I heard it from some other, goofball too sometimes. The charges don't provide a motive for Rio's slaying, but prosecutors say Wells claimed to have been using meth in the days leading up to her killing. It's what the Seattle Times person wrote. I just talked earlier this morning about a Zoom webinar I watched last night with some local, I would say they're more on the conservative side of things. News folks, Andy No down from Portland he covered Antifa. He got the milkshake beat down. I've talked about that. I mean, he really got knocked around, just horrible. He took a horrible beating. And then he wrote a book, and good book. I've read it and I own it. And we've got Jonathan Cho, the individual from Como, who reported on the Proud Boys having a march down in Olympia. He got fired from Como for that one. That one, that didn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's what I'm talking about here is that you can't report everything in the media and not have people go, yeah, not so much. Yeah. And then the other one was Brandy Cruz, and she recently left her really nice position at the local Fox affiliate. And, she's out on her own doing her own undivided podcast, just kind of like what I'm doing. She's taking her platform and trying to monetize it. She has a Patreon account. That's the word I'm looking for. I wanted to say, OnlyFans. That's not right. That's for porn. Patreon. That's what the clean, content creators, that's what they use to generate incomes. Cause all this stuff takes a lot of money to run. It takes a lot of money for me to get this content to you. It is not a cheap little deal. The News for Reasonable People, if it were a business, yeah, it's not a viable business. We make pretty good money when we're on, but long term, it takes a lot of horsepower to get out the kind of content we do. So if you can subscribe, that would be awesome, and watch as much as you can, because that's how we get paid. Let people know. Share the content. We're continually adding subscribers, so we've got a net positive account. It's just hard with the YouTube algorithm to kind of gain traction. One of those things, I need more storylines out there that are, kind of down my alley. And that's what we're working on. So appreciate everything that you do. If you're watching this, you're listening to this, and we're going to keep going here. So what the 911 call is now available, and it makes it even more clear that Wells thought that what he allegedly did was in service to Allah. Yeah, that's not something that you want to bring up in mainstream media right now. That is kind of a hard no-go. And the Times basically said, yeah, we're not gonna, what they literally said is, this is a tragic, complicated story. At this time, we have no plans to revise it. We will continue to track this case. All right. That's what I think the editor for the Seattle Times said. And then Jason Rantz comes out and says, this isn't a complicated story. And it's not. It's just that we say it's complicated so that we can kind of deflect to why maybe we didn't include all the details. And by we, I mean the majority of mainstream media here. So there's nothing complicated with any aspect of this story, Jason Rantz writes. Wells, allegedly under the influence of meth, says he killed the victim because he misread the Quran. It's very straightforward. And for the Times to even claim that they will continue to track the story is absurd, since they're not tracking it now. All right, Jason, tell us how you really feel. Jason kind of just goes in, boom, right to the cut. I appreciate that. The reason to withhold the information is that they think by printing the allegations that some would falsely believe that Islam teaches people to kill, or that his reading of the Quran is legitimate. We know that's not, right? We know that's not. But mainstream media, they can't even come close to touching some of this stuff. And that's why me, as a 53-year-old podcaster with zero background doing this, is able to get a foothold because I've covered some stuff that other people weren't willing to cover. It's not that difficult to do. And that's what I'm going to kind of keep on doing, is covering the storylines that other people are like, oh yeah, well, that's not a popular position. But because I basically give you my opinion on it, people are like, all right, yeah, well, that's that guy's impression of it. And he seems somewhat reasonable. He's a business guy. I'm still running 2 businesses, Reynolds and Klein Appraisal and Summit Properties Northwest. I don't do a lot of management on the Reynolds and Klein side. That one kind of runs itself for the most part. I've got great appraisers that work for me. Summit Properties Northwest, yeah, I'm still on the phone calls of, hey, Sean, made 15 offers and we can't figure out a strategy to get these buyers a house. What do you recommend? And you go into, hey, well, what price range are they working out? What can they afford? What price range are they starting to look, all that stuff. That's what I do on top of providing opinion news coverage on stuff that's going on out there. So the storyline here is that mainstream media believes that this kind of reporting could stigmatize Muslims. I don't think so. In fact, I think it has the opposite effect. I think it has the effect on people to trust the media even less. It's like, you're not giving us the full facts. We don't really know. So when that story does come out that, has an obvious cause and effect, we don't really know what to believe. And had Jason Rantz not probably pointed these issues out, I was looking for, how did this guy come up with this game plan? He's going to go hang out with his girlfriend. He's going to have sex with her. He's going to let her go to sleep. Then he's going to wake her up to kill her. And that's literally what he did. I mean, that just seemed to me like, okay, this guy has mental issues. Maybe it's the drugs. Don't know. Maybe it's the drugs on top of what he was reading. Don't really know. But I think the bottom line is that reasonable people know that this is an indication. It's not an indication of all Muslims. Just like if one crazy Christian is getting some inspiration from, Abraham and the kid that he was, his firstborn son that he was supposed to kill. Oh yeah, I got inspiration here from the Bible. That doesn't mean that everybody who reads the Bible is going to go down that road, especially after taking drugs for 4 days. That part to me. Yeah. Times journalists gleefully report when a cop is accused of a crime without any fear that their coverage could be used to paint all cops as criminals. That's true. That is wildly true. And in mainstream media in general, not just the Times. Everybody does that. Everybody does that because that's the bandwagon right now. And it's like, hey, wait a minute. This cop is in just a crazy scenario and he did what he's supposed to do. And 9 times out of 10, probably 9.5 times out of 10, when there's an investigation and no charges are filed against a cop as part of a shooting, a shooting that ends in somebody being dead, it's because the cop did his job and he followed protocol and he followed training. It's just that everybody else just wants the cop's blood. That's what happens. That's part of the reason I got into this is I saw everything that was going on over at CHOP and I'm like, there's some bullshit in here. Sorry. There's some bullshit in here because this doesn't make a lot of sense to me and I'm fairly reasonable. I'm going to go drive the 8 or 9 miles over to Seattle and just see what's going on. And that's how we ended up here. Right. And so we go back to coverage that could be used to paint all cops as criminals. So we're talking about news outlets not covering that. In fact, it often is misused by anti-police activists to do just that. Literally, they do that. And they don't change their coverage. Indeed, they change their guidelines to sow distrust of police accounts. On the Zoom conference call, 𝐏𝐞𝐰𝐬, whatever it was, you had comments going on while the Zoom conference was going on. It was Ari Hoffman and 3 other journalists here locally in Seattle. Ari was putting it on. He's a KVI local radio guy. And there was an Antifa guy in the comments just trolling everybody. And he was like throwing up links to Andy Ngo, just false stuff about Andy Ngo. And reasonable people, they can filter through and figure that out. Young kids, a lot of the kids I saw at the protests are members of Antifa or affiliated or whatever. They're young, impressionable kids, and they don't have a reasonable filter yet. They're just told, well, Andy, no, he's a far-right activist or extremist, so whatever he says can't be true. And so they go after him from that standpoint. So this is kind of what's going on in a city like Seattle, where you've got, I know I cover a lot of Seattle topics and I am willing to go national, but we've got pound for pound, Seattle's got as many crazy stories as any other city right now. So why would I go elsewhere when I can just cherry pick from my backyard? So this is an interesting one. Is it misleading for the media to not report on, all right, obvious number one, dude's black. Okay. Yep. But we've got pictures of it. We got pictures of him. It's out there. Dude's black. Could possibly be Muslim. Don't really know. He was reading from the Quran. So we've got that. And then also he was on drugs for days, ending up with him being maybe just flat out psychotic at the time where he did this, because in order to do what he did, you got to be out of your mind. There's no way a rational human being is able to do that with somebody that was allegedly their girlfriend. You got to be just absolutely tweaked. So, and reasonable people get that. But if you don't have all the facts, reasonable people start to pull back. And I know we've all been pulling back on, that storyline doesn't seem quite right. What is tweaked about that? There's something off there. And that's kind of what I thought when I saw this storyline. And then when I started to read stuff that Jason Rantz was saying, it's like, okay, well, that makes a little bit more sense. That is motive. I can understand that. So this is kind of what's going on. This is really interesting. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Should the media be reporting on this? Majority of you are going to say, absolutely, hell yes. But they're not going to, because of obviously the optics are not positive in a Democrat-run state and city, particularly like Seattle. Yeah, we don't really want to hear about that because that doesn't really go to motive. So, it's complex. This is a tricky issue, and we're doing our best to cover it, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And when something comes up, we'll get back to you. Meantime, that's literally how this goes, right? So what do you guys think? Should the media be burying this stuff? Yeah. Kind of a hard question for those of us that are maybe a little bit more moderate, because we're like, well, you just report the facts, and if they are what they are, then you let it rip and you let people make their own decisions. But we're having that decision taken away from us, that ability to make a judgment call on our own. Having that taken away from us because we're just not getting the information that mainstream media leads us to believe is what we should be seeing, because there's so much fear of cancel culture and, we don't want to step on somebody's toes. We don't want to, they're a protected group over there. And yeah, I get that. There are cases where that does need to be a thing. But when you've got a guy who's, you got a handful of things here that don't really add up to the point where they really add up, if you know what I mean. Does that make sense? All right. That's it for me on this one. Thank you so much for being here. But media coverage, bias, and maybe not media coverage. That's where I kind of go with this one. I was like, oh, yeah, we're seriously not getting all the bits and pieces that we need to make a decision here. It's kind of where we're at. Thanks so much for listening. I will catch up with you soon. Talk then. Bye for now.